So there's a YouTube creator that I follow who goes by the moniker Black Pigeon Speaks. Now, even though I disagree with a lot of what he has to say, I find that his videos are excellently made and very eloquent. They're worth watching as a good way to spark thinking and to try to break out of the echo chambers in which we can all sometimes find ourselves. Anyway, he recently posted a video called Atheism is Vacuous Grandiloquence. And although I agree with some of what he has to say, I also think that he is laboring under some common misconceptions regarding atheism. So this is my respectful response in an attempt to correct them. Oh, but before I get into that, if you're one of my subscribers who is waiting for another video about the video game industry, don't worry, I got you covered. I'm working on something new and I should have it up within the next few days. Okay, so let's look at some of the things that Mr. Pigeon has to say. Up front, the part that I most agree with him is probably what is closest to his central thesis, and that is that many atheists seem to be attacking religion or Christianity purely for their own self-satisfaction. And yet, upon tearing things down, they have nothing better to offer in its place.
When your average fedora-equipped atheist, quote-unquote, debates Christians, they attack the historical validity of Scripture, the obvious logical missteps of an ancient text, and smugly congratulate themselves for being so much smarter than those theist nincompoops, all the while missing the point entirely.
On this point, I essentially agree that many atheists, especially those who represent the face of atheism on YouTube, people like Jacqueline Glenn, Steve Shives, TJ Kirk, etc. They seem more interested in drumming up views by creating controversy than they do in offering something positive. These folks seem more about tearing down religion than about offering some kind of alternative. Indeed, it can sometimes seem that they are evangelizing nihilism. So if Mr. Pigeon's exposure to atheism is limited to this rather shallow investigation, maybe he's to be forgiven for thinking that that's all there is to it. Much of the rest of his video appears to proceed from this interpretation that atheism really amounts to a big fat zero that offers humanity very little of any practical value. No community, no morality, and no good answers for the big questions of existence. But I'm here to say that you can find meaningful solutions to the problems that Mr. Pigeon raises that are consistent with a godless universe. Let's take a look at some of them. So first, there's this.
Science, though, and it should be said, has been and is currently profoundly handicapped when it comes to explaining consciousness, which is an important, if not the most important component when it comes to understanding reality.
Well, Mr. Pigeon, the truth is that science is doing very well and making great strides towards understanding consciousness. Yes, it's a frontier where much work has yet to be done, but if you're serious about understanding what is going on upstairs, there is a lot that can be said. For example, here's a great place to start. This book, Consciousness Explained, published clear back in 1991 by the philosopher Daniel Dennett, outlines something called the multiple drafts model, which posits that by looking at consciousness as an outgrowth of many individual and often competing neurobiological systems, the whole process begins to come into focus. Also, elsewhere in your video, Mr. Pigeon, you mentioned Dr. Sam Harris. Now, Dr. Harris is himself a neurobiologist who sees consciousness as gradually yielding to scientific inquiry as we continue to do research and get better and better understanding of how all these pieces fit together. Furthermore, Dr. Harris advocates for finding a sense of spirituality rooted in reality and meditation rather than in the damaging fictions of religion. Here's his book, Waking Up, which, as you can see at the bottom here, is subtitled A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion. Oh, and check this out. It's even signed, too, because I'm cool like that.
It could be also that we are looking at reality inside out, where standard science would have you believe that matter gives rise to consciousness, rather than the other way around.
All right, so this little statement here sounds to me like maybe you've been spending a little too much time with whack jobs like Deepak Chopra. To that, I'd just like to say that there is zero evidence that consciousness precedes matter. Absolutely none. On the other hand, 100% of the evidence indicates the contrary. It always shows us that matter is necessary as a precedent for consciousness to exist. Now, forgive me for being so blunt here, Mr. Pigeon, but this should be obvious to anyone who has a brain, right? We know this from direct experimentation. We know that we can profoundly impact one's sense of consciousness by messing around with the neurons upstairs. If you've ever been drunk or high, you know that even tiny chemical changes impact how you perceive the world. Anesthesia will completely obliterate your sense of consciousness for a short period of time. Brain injuries can radically alter a person's perception of both reality and of themselves. All of this is consistent with the notion that matter precedes consciousness and not the other way around.
But either way, any way you look at it, we do not understand the universe that we inhabit, nor especially the uniqueness of consciousness. And in an upcoming video, I'm going to try and explain why it will probably be impossible for us to ever do so, without assistance, that is.
Well, okay. I look forward to that video. Although before you get too enthusiastic about your notion that we can't possibly explain consciousness given our current understanding of the universe, may I suggest some preliminary background reading that strongly suggests that we can. For example, how about this one, the user illusion, cutting consciousness down to size. Or maybe Steven Pinker here, the stuff of thought and how language is a key part of human nature. Or maybe this one, How to Create a Mind, Ray Kurzweil, The Secret of Human Thought Revealed. Or maybe this, well, Surfaces and Essences here. This is by Doug Hofstadter, which is basically saying about how analogy is what fuels our consciousness.
Advocates of atheism offer nothing, no substitute for the vast majority of people that do believe in God, nor do they even contemplate, let alone speak of the social vacuum that has been created in places like Europe with the fall of Christianity.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pigeon, but again, I feel like you may be speaking from a position of ignorance. Atheists like Dawkins and Harris do offer positive alternatives to religion. For example, although you're right, Dawkins did write The God Delusion, right? He's also written other books like Unweaving the Rainbow, which is about how to find joy in scientific inquiry. And while Harris wrote The End of Faith, he followed it up with a surprisingly, astoundingly good book called The Moral Landscape, which I don't have right now because I loaned it out, in which he advocates for evaluating societies via the lens of how much well-being they bring to the people who live in them, and then using that evaluation as a way to help point us towards morality. It's kind of a fusion of science with moral values. Sam gave a great TED Talk on this subject. Here's a quick bit of that, and then I'll put a link to the entire talk down in the description.
And consequently, most people, I think most people probably here, think that science will never answer the most important questions in human life. Questions like, what is worth living for? What is worth dying for? What constitutes a good life? So I'm going to argue that this is an illusion, that the separation between science and human values is an illusion, and actually quite a dangerous one at this point in human history.
All right, so it's about time to wrap this up. Mr. Pigeon summarizes his video thusly.
In place of religion in the modern West, there is moral relativism and nihilism, which is the new religion of modernity, where everything and anything is acceptable, so long as it's backed up by and couched in a grandiloquent argument.
My counterpoint is that once you move away from the shallow, pop culture, trendy atheism of places like YouTube and really look closely at things, you quickly discover that rather than advocating for moral relativism, many of the top atheist thinkers are advocating for the bettering of human existence via appeals to science, first as a way for improving our understanding, and then coupling that with morality based upon universal human rights and upon improving the well-being of all people. In short, atheism first recognizes that it is very likely that we humans are alone in the universe, and consequently, we need to take responsibility for ourselves rather than looking to some super being or some magical power to save us. And in order to do that, we should begin not from a position of faith, but rather from one of fact. All right, so that's all I have to say about this right now. So thank you for your time, and take care, my friends.